Hey there and welcome back to another My Hero Academia review. And today we're diving into Deku, Bakugo's and Todoroki's internship with Endeavour, plus some more setup for the Meta Liberation Army, so this is a pretty heavy plot-driven episode. But before we get into all that, I just want to let you guys know I have read the manga, and I'm aware of any relevant future plot points and details. But for the purpose of these reviews, I only like to talk about what the anime's presented up to now, and not go back and forth between the manga and the anime. It just helps to keep the review streamlined and allows anime-only fans to watch along and join in too. But with that being said, let's get started. We start off the episode how we seem to be starting off a lot of episodes recently, following Hawks as he heads back to the mysterious building where he met up with Slide and Go in the previous episode. And I'm guessing this is where the Liberation Army headquarters are. He goes into a dark meeting room filled with a few characters we've not really seen before, as well as a few members of the League of Villains like Twice, Darby, Spinner, Toga, and Compress. He tells them that he's working hard at spreading the Liberation Army ideology, which prompts another character we've never seen before to praise him, saying that he truly understands Destro's work, and that it'll help them reach a younger demographic simply by acting like a walking propaganda billboard. And yeah, this is actually a little unfortunate, because whilst he's getting good info for the heroes as a spy, since he's being watched, he can't really go around telling people this is all an act, so I bet a fair amount of people are actually buying into the propaganda and turning into the villains. Hawks then lies and tells them that they're not even on the Hero Commission's radar, and that they're still fixated on Daika City being the work of the League of Villains, whilst also telling them that he's been hard at work indoctrinating the next generation of heroes. So pretty early into the episode, we are again having the name drop of Daika City, and I think this is just planting further seeds for a big reveal. Hawks then leaves the room, but not before sticking one of his feathers in the door so that he can still hear what's going on via the vibrations that the feathers pick up, which, side note, is a really cool power. And this is where he hears that the attack's going to take place in 4 months, but he seems surprised. But this is set after he gives the book to Endeavour, warning them about the attack in 4 months because they were looking at how they took out the glass villain in the meeting room. So I'm not really sure why he's so shocked. He already knew this, didn't he? He put it in the book he gave to Endeavour. Maybe he didn't know Shigaraki was going to destroy everything? Who knows? It really doesn't make much sense to me, honestly. After the intro, we find ourselves back in Endeavour's office, with a quick recap of what he discovered in the book Hawks gave him last episode, of how the army's 100,000 strong, and that they'll attack in 4 months, before we return to Hawks again. He thinks about how many heroes are in the building right now and that have turned into villains, before wondering what Shigaraki's actually planning. And I like that in this scene, you see that both Hawks and the villains are actually quite smart about what they're doing. The villains don't just let him wander around freely, they keep him restricted from certain areas and followed around by members of the organisation. Whilst Hawks himself doesn't reveal this secret base to the heroes despite them being able to round up the ringleaders, because that would mean that many heroes that have turned villain would escape, as well as other members across Japan. He instead wants to do a sting on all the branches across the country at once to get them all. And this is actually very smart, so props to him. We then cut back to Endeavour where he continues deciphering more of Hawks' code, unveiling that Hawks will be sending him a signal when the time comes, and that the work-study students are a backup because they likely need more manpower for the upcoming operation. And this causes Endeavour to reflect on a meeting he had with the Hero Commission where he was heavily pressured to take on work-study students, with the board woman telling him to train them very thoroughly. Endeavour, being one smart cookie, then puts together that Hawks and the Commission are working together and basically prepping the Hero Corps students to become their own little army of child soldiers. And I'm glad that Endeavour kind of seemed outraged by this a little bit. I mean, obviously he'll go through with it because, 100,000 enemies, but I'm glad that his moral compass is starting to shift a little bit. And I'm also glad that as Endeavour's having this realization, Hawks is also having doubts about it as well. So he isn't some ultimate cold pragmatist. He'll do what he has to do, but he does have his doubts, just like how he wanted to take all the ringleaders down immediately, but he has to wait to get them all at once despite how it frustrates him. It just makes the characters feel more three-dimensional. We then get a glimpse at the big three in the Endeavour agency talking to Burnin, who tells Deku and Bakugo that they'll spend all their time with the sidekicks while Shoto trains with Endeavour, to Bakugo's anger. And he has a point. Why even let them come if you were going to sideline them? They could have gone to a slightly lower down hero and gotten a really good experience, and instead you basically want to just screw them over. And typical Deku just bends over and takes it, while Shoto says that he'll talk to him about it, because that's always worked so well for Shoto in the past. His dad has always been such an open and caring man who listens to his family's opinions. Although, to be honest, considering Endeavour's change of heart, Todoroki could probably just manipulate him into doing whatever he wants. Endeavour then exits his office thinking about how he doesn't agree with what the Commission's doing, but that he really has no choice if he wants to be certain of victory. He then tells Shoto, Deku, and Bakugo that they will all be under his direct supervision and training. Oh, well that was easy. And then we return to Hawks at the villain base, who reflects on something Darby said about the big three and how they haven't grown much as heroes. Hawks realizes though that Darby's spouting some BS and he's underestimating them, and that he purposely stole their glory against the Servant of the Stars to keep them under the radar a bit more. He then reflects on how seeing Tokoyami try so hard to prove himself and keep up with him had made Hawks more interested in training the next generation of heroes, and that he's glad that he came to his agency. He then thinks about how the next generation's growing stronger and more skilled every day as we get a brief little montage of images showing what everybody's been up to on work studies. In a perfect world, we'd get an episode on each, but you can't have everything, I suppose. He then thinks on how the villains won't have an easy time against these new heroes, and that he hopes that by the time the cherry blossoms fall again, that they'll all be able to smile. Yeah, I'm going to take a guess and say that is unlikely at best. Also, this episode's going really hard on showing another side to Hawks. Similar to Endeavour, they initially both come across as pretty one-dimensional characters, with Endeavour being a meathead bully type, and Hawks being a comedian that doesn't take work too seriously. But here they're kind of covering all bases with Hawks, showing how he's concerned over his own judgments on the right way to take down the Meta Liberation Army, his fears for the young heroes and whether it's right to involve them, his change of heart thanks to Tokoyami on the future of the hero business, and his appreciation on how devoted some heroes can be, like the big three. It doesn't really come across all that strong when you watch it, but once you break it down, it's easy to see how much Hawks has changed or grown since he picked up the mission. We then return to Endeavour's agency, where Endeavour asks Deku and Bakugou to tell him about themselves, what they need to work on, and what they can do. Deku replies that he wants to be able to fully control his power and perform at maximum potential, as well as control his new manifestation, Black Whip. He then proceeds to info dump Endeavour and descends into his patented mutterings as he tries to explain his current capabilities and goals, while Shoto and Bakugou look on in horror and anger. And then, to everybody's shock, Endeavour completely understands what he wants to be able to do, prompting Burnin to exclaim that he isn't number one for nothing. And so true. Literally everybody else has been put off by the mumbling and the overanalyzing, but Endeavour literally just listened and formulated a response. And it goes to show that he really does work harder than anybody else, even All Might. All Might just got blessed with the god of quirks and was way more charismatic. But Endeavour had to work hard, not only physically, but mentally, to understand what made All Might number one, so that he could try and surpass him one day. Even though he didn't end up succeeding, that does take some serious brain power, and it just really hones in on the fact that Endeavour is actually really intelligent. And it's also pretty hilarious that Deku and him have this quirk super nerd ability that they share. He then reflects again on how Deku's power is similar to All Might's, and honestly it would be funny if he later speculates that he's his son. And then tells Deku that since he's had trouble with his power, that makes him one of them. So I'm guessing that means Endeavour also had troubles with his quirk in a similar way, likely burning himself and overheating before he built up his high resistance to heat. And it would be pretty cool to explore that later down the track. Bakugou then goes on to explain that he wants to find out what he can't do, thinking about how he's always been able to do anything he wanted to with his quirk, and that even if he only has one quirk, he believes he can still be the strongest. He then tells Endeavour that he wants to know what he has to do in order to surpass the number one hero. And Endeavour then looks a little bit shook, and I think it's almost like he sees a young him in Bakugou, and it freaks him out how intense it is, I guess. And it's almost like he has a moment of realization about how others must view him. Endeavour then tries to leave and take them to train, only for Shoto to ask if he can also speak about why he's there, with Endeavour yelling that he's there to learn flash fire. Shoto responds that he's put into practice Endeavour's training from childhood, but only on his right side, his ice side. He talks about how all his life his head was filled with pointless hatred towards Endeavour, but that learning to compete at UA has cleared his mind. But despite that, he still doesn't forgive what he's done, and he hasn't come there to make amends, but rather to train and use the number one hero as a resource so he can try and follow in All Might's footsteps. And after a little moment of sadness at this response, Endeavour hardens his heart a little bit and states that he understands, and from now on the three of them are simply heroes at his agency, and that's how they're going to be treated. We then jump into some good old-fashioned Endeavour hero mentorship, with him telling the lads that rescue, evacuation, and fighting are the three basic categories of what heroes do, and that whilst most heroes usually specialise into a specific type of hero, he believes that you need to be an expert at all three things. And this seems like a good plan to me. Once again, there's a reason that only All Might can seem to top this guy. And this is further compounded by his statement that he knows every corner of his city and thus any slight abnormalities noted and investigated. Jesus, he's like Batman levels of dedicated. And honestly, they're doing a really good job of making him seem like the real deal and like an unstoppable force. He then tells them that he always gets to an incident before anybody else, and clears away bystanders with his flames in order to keep casualties down, although that doesn't really sound safe, but whatever. He tells the three that hero work is a matter of what you accumulate. At UA, they accumulate hard work, and at work studies, they accumulate experience. And if they build up their experience, they'll be able to achieve the objectives they stated earlier in the episode. And Jesus, he's actually a really good mentor when you scratch away all the bluster and the arrogance. A hell of a lot better than All Might, in my opinion. He knows what he's doing and is cutting to the core of the job quite easily. And I expect that the three youngsters are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of anybody else by the end of this. He then challenges them to capture a villain before he can, just once during the course of their hero study, before he gets an incident response and jets off at super speed with the interns struggling to keep up. And whilst Deku reflects on how far he still has to go, Endeavour flexes hard on them, showing off how he doesn't even need to slow down to take sharp corners. Truly a beast of a man. And then he just takes out the criminal and arrests him before the interns even catch up. And then he flexes even harder on them by explaining that he made split-second decisions based on his knowledge of the terrain that allowed him to predict the criminal's path. He also tells them that he did notice the glass villain's goon squad last episode and that he left them for them on purpose. Just to make sure they know their place, I guess. He's very reminiscent of Bakugou, although hopefully Bakugou treats his kids a bit better if he ever has any. Endeavour then tells Bakugou the answer to his question of what he can do to surpass him. He says that Bakugou's fast for a rookie, but nowhere near to his level, and that he can't make excuses like he needs to warm up in the winter, because this isn't class. You're not going to lose marks, but a person's going to lose their life. And he says this as he stops a truck one-handed. And how? How does he do this? I get that he somehow flies using the pressure from the fire or something like that, but how would this let him stop a truck as if he's All Might? Also, using fire near a vehicle like that seems like it's an accident waiting to happen. I just need some clarification here. He then tells Shoto and Bakugou that they need to do the same thing to improve, learn to store up their power and condense it so they can use their maximum output in a split second, and that they need to practice doing this until they can do it without thinking. And honestly, that seems like pretty good mentoring to me. Endeavour seems to love going for the one-hit KO, and it probably lets him get to lots of different incidents in record time. We then cut to a rooftop where the four are eating some food, and Endeavour remains comically overgrown as he can hold a burger using 2 fingers. How is he so big? He then states that Deku's able to draw up his full power in an instant, and asks whether he can do it without thinking. Deku replies that he can with full cowling, but that with Air Force he still has to think about how he's controlling the power. Thus, his homework is to make Air Force Smash another subconscious ability, whilst forgetting about Black Whip for the time being. He explains that it's important that he masters his base powers first before adding others, like how you slowly learn to drive and add more and more skills subconsciously. Parallel processing. As you master each ability, you can add it to your repertoire and it becomes second nature, but that you shouldn't try too much at once. Master each skill one by one. And man, he really is a great hero mentor, isn't he? And he's really just blowing all of Deku's other mentors out of the water besides Gran Torino. But I expect that if Endeavour knew about the specifics of Deku's quirk, he would surpass him in that too. He tells them that they need to take what they cultivate at school and master it in the work study, as it's the best environment to see what truly works. He then interrupts his inspirational speech to say that it doesn't even matter if they fail, because it won't impact his work, basically outright stating that they will never manage to get a villain before he takes it down. So, good luck. And then Deku resolves to go beyond as the episode ends. And honestly, this was a good episode in my opinion, like really good. We got some good plot in regards to the upcoming villain plans, and we got to see some epic Endeavour moments as a mentor. It's gotten me super hyped for this arc, and honestly, for the movie too. But that being said, those are just my thoughts, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Like it? Hate it? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know.